I think I'll start with Matt, since you're the and that's what talking about today. So Matt, in your biography that you gave us to prepare for today, you mentioned that you made one career move to reduce the amount of time you spent away from your family. I'm curious how kind of your faith has impacted your career and your family decisions along the way. You know, the Generation X, Millennials, Generation Z, those folks are all about this work-life balance. But you've been at it a long time, and you've raised a family and kids and grandkids. How's that faith life impacted your decisions about family-work balance?
Well, Peter, my career spanned 40-something years, so there's a lot of ground here to cover. My faith started having a significant impact on my career and family decisions during my senior year at Mount St. Mary High School. In our Catholic family, we were raised to believe the husband was solely responsible for providing all the income needed to support the family. I was part of the first generation in my family to receive a college degree, the oldest child, and therefore I had no examples to go by. I know my two younger brothers, all three of us only 11 months apart, were not destined for professional careers. So I felt the right thing for me to do was to follow a different career path, which would give them the opportunity to take over the family Culligan water business, which they still run today. My grade average in high school was not great, but I was able to graduate from petroleum engineering school at Oklahoma University near the top of my class. It was not easy, and I had many challenges and blessings, like getting married at the end of my third year and Janice becoming pregnant a few months later, having to reshuffle my class schedule from a 4.5-year program to a 4-year program, and being able to graduate in 4 years, just 3 weeks prior to Janice giving birth to our first child. This meant taking 23 credit hours my last semester, working part-time at Devon Energy 2 days a week, and securing a full-time job as a petroleum engineer that I commenced the day after taking my last final. I had faith that the Lord would help me if I tried my best, and I kept my trust in Him. But I never got to rest. A month prior to graduation, several companies rescinded their job offers to many of my classmates because of an industry slowdown. Many rounds of job layoffs commenced immediately after I started to work during that last decade. I felt I had to excel at what I did to be able to retain employment so that I could support my growing family. Consequently, I accepted a transfer to corporate headquarters in Houston in year 5 of my career. Then another transfer 2 years later to corporate headquarters in Melbourne, Australia, and then back to Houston 2 years later for the birth of our third child. After 2 more years in Houston and making frequent business trips to South America, our oldest child, age 11, was preparing to start her 5th school. I decided to quit a very secure and well-paying job that had great prospects for advancement, sell our home in Houston, and moved the family back to Oklahoma City in 1993 when the job market in the industry was bad. A few days after giving my 2 weeks notice, a new job listing by Enron was posted in the Sunday Oklahoman, and I responded. They hired me, and I never missed a day of work. My next leap of faith was accepting an unsolicited job offer from a small independent oil company in Oklahoma City that had become familiar with my abilities. My acceptance was contingent on them paying off my credit card debts and that they had no intention of selling the company. They assured me that that was not a concern because they had multiple owners that did not see eye to eye, and it required 100% approval to sell. A year later, they decided to sell the company. After reviewing an appraisal that I had prepared covering all their assets and all their limited partnerships. Prior to closing, the president came to my office and stated he was not ready to retire. and that he would like to start a new company with me being his sole business partner. Fortunately, he agreed to provide the seed capital since I had no money in savings, 4 children with 3 in Catholic schools. Interquest Oil and Gas was started in October 1996, and I bought out my retiring business partner in December 2021. If I have a fear, it's what leap of faith the Lord wants me to take next in my life.
That's great, Matt. Thank you. Joe, you want to tell us a little bit about your path?
Yeah, sure. Probably not as colorful as Matt's, but my wife and I were both what we found out later when we moved to Oklahoma is called Cradle Catholics. And we started in Connecticut, not very far from where Owen was raised, and moved to South Texas because that was the land of opportunity, and hired on with Schlumberger as a field engineer. And it was quite the change for Mrs. B because she likes the cold weather. Of course, I love the heat, and there they count how many days they have over 100 degrees. And it's easier to count how many days are under 100, but we lived in a small town of Pleasanton, Texas, which is south of San Antonio, and I was gone, out on the rigs the whole time, all the time. We'd work, numerous days and weeks straight, and there was no cell phones or internet, so Barbara didn't know where I was, and fortunately we didn't have any children. Later, to fast forward, we ended up after moving 5 times in 8 years, decided that we wanted a place of stability, and we thought maybe since we had lived both in Texas and Colorado along with Louisiana and other places that maybe we'd move to one of those states. But when this opportunity came to come to Oklahoma, we came here and really saw it as a place that we can raise our family, which by that point we had 3 young children, and we didn't want to be pulling them out of school. Barbara became she kind of shed her business degree and went back to school and loved the opportunity to become a Catholic school teacher, and she taught at St. Mary's up until relatively recently, and then she came to work for Charter Oak. So at the point that I had the opportunity to retire, and just because I had my points in at Schlumberger, I felt that I had a calling, and that I didn't know where the next penny was going to come from, but that God was going to be our protector. And I remember saying to Barbara, if we pay off the house, I sold a few shares of Schlumberger stock, paid the house off, we could live on your St. Mary's teacher salary. Barely. We would be, eating a lot of, pasta and potatoes. But it's very, very surprisingly, I hung a shingle out at the Waterford, and people started calling. I did consulting work initially, and then people started coming to us and say, hey, look, would you mind, operating this deal? So we became a bonded operator in Oklahoma and Texas, and started initially buying wells and then drilling wells. And of course, the first well we drilled was a dry hole, and then we drilled a couple of marginal wells. So it's like, well, that's not a great start, but again, faith was with us, and eventually after that point, we bought a couple of wells that both turned out to be field discoveries. So it very fortunately worked out for us. And to kind of summarize, I always feel that when things aren't going well, as anybody here in the oil patch knows, when that phone rings at 2 a.m, it's not your field guys calling to tell you about how great everything's going. When they're calling at 2 a.m, it is not good. But I always remember that something that a priest had told me once, which was, God takes care of even the tiniest birds and the tiniest animals of the world. So he's going to take care of us. And that's kind of been my mantra. Even through this past year, there's been some trials and tribulations out in the oil patch with, costs going up tremendously and prices collapsing on oil and natural gas. But I really believe that God is taking care of us.
Hey, Joe.
I share a lot in common when it comes to when you talk about making decisions around work and family and how your faith relates to it. I think the first and foremost, a little closer, sorry. First and foremost is having your priorities right, and having faith first and then family coming before work and career, and recognizing that those career decisions need to be in the service of your family and need to be in the service of your faith. So, similarly, early in my career, was working for ExxonMobil, traveling internationally. The kids were young. Needed to make some decisions to have more family time. Opportunities came to take the family overseas. That wouldn't have been the right fit for anyone who knows my wife, Robin. Will understand that wouldn't have been the right fit for us. So, keeping those priorities right, and then taking those career and family decisions to prayer. I mean, that's another important foundation is taking those decisions to the altar and working through it as a faithful decision. Another aspect of that where work and career comes in service of the faith is giving back time, talent, and treasure, and making that an important part of your family decisions. Tithing, both in terms of as a symbol and cultivating the habit that what we're doing as we're earning and progressing in our careers, part of what we're doing is giving back to the church, certainly, but also developing some detachment from the material things and the pursuit of wealth and careerism and advancement, and just keeping first and foremost in your mind that work and career is good. There's the imperative to provide for your family, but there's also the imperative to give back.
I love that answer.
Yeah, that was a Peter DeCaricci special. The other thing I wanted to mention, that's kind of the view of our work and our career for those of us that are in the business world, that is part of our vocation. Again, family is our first vocation, but also our work is part of our vocation. And created in the image and likeness of God, our work is how we participate in God's creative nature. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind as well. I think when work is rightly ordered, even just creating economic value, that's a virtuous thing to do. That's creating with God, taking raw materials and ideas and turning them into products and services. That's a good and virtuous thing to do, and I think we lose sight of that sometimes as a society. And then also, other work is around promoting human flourishing and virtue. Those are important things to do, and other rightly ordered ways to work. If you're not doing one of those things, if you're not creating economic value or promoting human flourishing, you probably ought to check what you're doing for a living. You might be a grifter or a criminal or something, I don't know. But I was challenged before we came up here that, how do you connect your Catholicism to oil and gas? And it's really in those ways, because what we do as an industry does both of those things. We create value, we promote human flourishing through the provision of reliable and inexpensive energy and raw materials for plastics and products that make our modern life, what it is today. So oil and gas very much, when you look at it through that lens, very much ties to my faith, because again, we participate in God's creative work, and we make society a better place. So that I think people outside of the industry may not have a full appreciation for how we connect to our work in that way.
So something that strikes me is that all three of you, as kind of CEOs, leaders of your companies, have to be incredibly busy. I mean, with your work lives, personal lives, and constant. If you're anything like me, and I know all three of you are, you kind of constantly bombarded with new things to do and trying to get everything done in a day is almost impossible. But to start with you on this question, I know that about a year ago, you made a personal commitment to attend daily Mass. You decided to make that a priority in your life. And one of my spiritual directors said to me once, Peter, there's a great he said, folks on Paul's staff used to waste a lot of time in prayer. Just waste time. You know, clearly the Holy Father is more busy than you are. I'm not hyperbole, but you know. So the point is that you made an intentionality about prayer and being involved in your parish as a laicus. Talk to us a little bit about how you made that decision and how you prioritize being involved in your parish as opposed to just recording.
Well, as your spiritual director did to you, I was shamed into it. I made the acquaintance of a CEO who was very known in public about being a daily communicant, and I asked him. I said, "That's the sort of thing I aspire to. You know, how do you make it work? How do you fit it into your schedule? You know, how do you arrange things so that you can go to daily mass? Because you're at least as busy as I am." And he looked at me and said, "Well, I make it a priority," which just cut me in two. That okay, obviously that's the answer. It's making it a priority. So it is a commitment I made. It's as you would expect. It's borne an incredible amount of spiritual fruit for me. It's helping me to be a better person, and therefore a better leader, and therefore better at what I do in my work. So it is simply that. It's making a priority. Unfortunately, as leaders in our organizations, we often have the flexibility to set our schedules or move a meeting when it interferes with the mass schedule. So it's certainly something I recommend. It's something I've benefited from, and I'd urge everyone to make it a priority.
Matt, how do you balance engagement with your parish and your faith life?
Well, in my career, when I did move back from Houston to Oklahoma City, I did work downtown, and so I had the option or the availability to go to daily mass at St. Joseph's, which is what I did, and I would have continued to do that until the Murrah bombing blew up. So I would have walked past that building just 2.5 hours after it blew up, and then by the time they got the church rebuilt, I had already taken another job on the far north side of town. And that was not convenient at the time. And I was extremely busy with 4 kids and coaching, and I just did not have that in my day to be able to go to daily mass. But in recent years at St. Mark's in Norman, I have been going to daily mass whenever I can. It fits my schedule. So.
Joe, how about your engagement with your life at St. Monica?
Back when the church reopened after COVID, the commitment I wanted to start going to mass more often than just on Sunday, and so just from where I usually am, leaving the gym in Edmond, I would go to St. John's and Edmond, and had continued that, and I try, no matter. I'll set my schedule around being there on Wednesday mornings, but I've been accused by some of my Catholic running friends that mostly go to St. Francis that I go there on Wednesdays because they have free coffee and food on Wednesday mornings. So, but it is very important, and I feel that you have that Catholic principles are there in your daily life and your work life, and I know there's a lot of companies that try to say they're a team, but we always talk there at Charter Oak. We always say we're a family. So everybody in our group is a family, and you try to treat the people you work with, not only within your office, but the people that you work and interact with, as a family would be, a Catholic family.
Awesome. So let's maybe switch to a little more industry-specific question before we open things to the audience for questions. So the oil and gas industry is historically known for its roller coaster of ups and downs, highs and lows. Even in the 7 years that I've been in Oklahoma, it's been amazing to watch the high highs and the low lows. So given the clashes over green energy and fossil fuels are you optimistic or are you pessimistic about the future of your industry in the United States and specifically here in Oklahoma? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say steady employment and returns on investment within the oil and gas industry has historically been the roller coaster, but not the industry itself. I would be very optimistic about the industry's future if the market forces were the controlling factors and not the government trying to control who the winners and losers are going to be. I'm not pessimistic because I believe the cost of the energy transition our current government is envisioning will take decades longer than they fantasize and will cost 10 to 100 times more than they advertise. My sad prediction is all the money will be spent before they realize their approach will have a negligible impact. It is dangerous to simply believe technology is going to evolve fast enough to solve all our problems in the way we think they need to be solved. Instead of 5 to 10 years, maybe it's going to be more like 50 years. For example, the cruising speed of a commercial jet airplane today is barely faster than a Boeing 707 was 65 years ago. And the time it takes you to travel from your doorstep of your home when you factor in TSA time to a destination in the United States is longer. So I don't see that that's much progress, and there's been economic incentive to create that progress. Another quick example is the old zinc carbon D-cell flashlight battery that was commercially introduced in 1898 that is still sold in your grocery store today. And there are numerous examples besides these. This industry will continue to exist for many decades to come because the world needs lots of cheap energy from all sources to continue to improve both the environment and the standard of living for everyone on the earth.
Great. Joe, you have some thoughts?
Yes. Chuck brought up about human flourishing, and a lot of the people in the oil and gas are a follower of someone named Alex Epstein, who's out of California. He's not in any energy or oil and gas business. He considers himself an economic philosopher, and Alex is kind of the big cheerleader of human flourishing, and I really believe that human flourishing is a big Catholic principle. And Alex has written a couple of books, Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, and lately one called Fossil Future. But he also has like websites and blogs, and there's just a couple of factoids that I throw out, that there's 3 billion people that use less electricity than an American refrigerator. That's in a whole year. They use less electricity. A third of the world still uses wood or dung for heating and cooking. I mean, these are some things that are that are very sad. And there's only one fuel that's went away, which is whale oil. It's the only thing that went away, probably thanks to oil and gas in there. Every other fuel, when we hear of an energy transition, it's probably going to be more of an energy evolution, because we burn more wood today in the world than we did back when it was the primary fuel. We actually burn more coal today in the world than when it was the primary fuel. And someone had told me there was 200 coal-fired power plants under construction in the world. I went and looked that up on the internet, and I found there was actually 190. So pretty darn close. Majority are in China and India. They want electricity. They need inexpensive power, as does Africa, Asia, places in South America. So it's easy for people in America and Europe to say, oh yeah, we're just going to have this transition. We're just going to all drive electric cars. Well, it's going to be multiple decades. So yes, we have a future, and it is certainly about human flourishing, a very Catholic principle.
I agree. Joe took most of my talking points on that question.
But
it is an economic justice issue, and the ability for people all over the world, not just in the U.S. and Europe, to have access to to the energy sources that can help them improve their standard of living, help them improve the longevity of their lives, and ease their suffering. That's a justice issue, and that's something that I think Catholics can very easily get behind. I think, again, bringing our common faith into it again, I think on 2 points. One, it is clearly outside of Oklahoma. This is not a very popular opinion. It's kind of countercultural, which Catholics are built for. And also, along with that, I'm going to lose my train of thought. But also just the facts that Joe pointed out, that other energy fuels or energy sources have not gone away. We haven't transitioned. We found new ones. Great wind and solar are great. We need more of that. We need more of everything because of the justice issue. Because people need access to these means of flourishing. So there's an element of being connected to the truth, and even when it is not the popular opinion. As we're all men of science, and we're all Catholics, and both of those motivations have us committed to the truth and the facts wherever that leads us. So I'm optimistic about the industry. I think you don't last long in this industry if you're not optimistic, if you're not an optimist, and we're going to be around and applying our ingenuity to develop these resources for a long time.
Wonderful, thank you. So we have about 5 minutes. If we have 1 or 2 questions, does anybody have any burning question they'd like to ask our panel? No? Father Rick's making his exit. Carl?
Can you all share how much that, each of you individually have been involved in the political process?
My answer on that is 0 for me.
Joe, you want to take that one?
Well, that's a loaded question, because the other side, and there is another side to this, is very involved in the political process, and they're not afraid to go not only donate money but to buy the newspapers and TV stations. So the American public in particular, I can't say for other parts of the world, they're just bombarded with only one side of this story. And so it's kind of sad, and I guess we do need to do more in that regard.
Agreed. There are certainly industry groups and political action committees that are try to get this message out and try to help friendly candidates get elected. But Joe's right. It's we're massively outgunned by other interest groups. They have economic motivations. Government subsidies are a powerful motivating force, and a lot of money gets spent in the pursuit of those subsidies, and that's something that our industry as a whole, I think Joe's right, we haven't done near enough to try to counter that.
Thank you. Do we have one, Father Zach?
Thank you. Does any of you have a story of a time when you were really challenged in terms of the business element in your Catholic faith, with a business interaction or a deal, and then you had to really step up and show your faith, and it bore some fruit in the life of a colleague or the partner or the business that you were dealing with? Does anybody have a story like that comes to mind to you?
I can think of maybe during the pandemic. We have a high degree of trust with one another, with the employees in our office, and we never closed our office doors during COVID, nor did we wear masks in the office. I ordered out and paid for lunch every day, and the employees enjoyed sharing their meal together in the break room, visiting, and providing support to one another in the time of crisis. So that was, and most in the office eventually contracted the disease, but never from a coworker. Work from home was allowed until they tested negative after recovery, and they always wanted to come back to the office as soon as they could.
I'll echo that a bit.
Free food.
Yeah. No, COVID was a difficult time. Certainly in my company, we were also going through a financial restructuring at a bankruptcy, to put it bluntly. I think coming out of my faith and recognizing that the people that I'm fortunate enough to lead are also created in the image and likeness of God. And what comes out of that as a leader is recognizing that they are never a means to an end. Those people are an end in themselves, and that comes directly out of our faith. Recognizing that those people had difficult decisions to make because they have, family or other loved ones that may be depending on them to have that job and have that income stream. And being in financial distress, we were likely looking at some layoffs through the course of things. So, rooted in my faith and that recognition, made the decision, echoing what these guys said, to be very transparent about our condition, the likelihood that we'd have layoffs, the likelihood that we'd make it through the bankruptcy or not, recognizing that the best decision that they may need to make for themselves and their families is not to wait around and find out and wait for something to happen. We were likely to lose some people who needed to make a different career choice than sticking it out with us. And that was difficult because we need our people to work together and hang together. So, that was certainly a case where, kind of faith in action, if you will, and trying to make the right decisions with the right goal in mind for our people, to enable them to make their own decisions and give them their agency, the information they need to exercise their agency to make the right decision. So those relationships, and that there are other analogies with suppliers and vendors and investors. Maybe it wasn't the target of your question. It wasn't sitting down and holding hands and having a God conversation with somebody, but certainly, while I'm not necessarily faith forward with all of my employees, they all know where I'm coming from. When I introduced myself as their leader, I told them, hey, you don't know me unless you know this part of my life, and know that as I'm making decisions, it's coming out of prayer and coming out of faith, and that may not be your choices, but I want you to know that that's how I make my decisions.
Joe, would you like to add anything?
Well, I think Chuck and Matt really have said it all, and it's about not just talking the talk, as we've all worked for people who will tell you one thing and go do another. I mean, I think you want to treat people as they want to be treated, being very straight up front with them, and I think that in our office there's about 10 of us, and everybody knows that we'll not take a salary before we would not pay somebody, and we want everybody to be treated fairly, and I think that, like you say, it goes appreciated. So.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for speaking today. We're great. It's great to have you. Thank you. Everyone, the next ACP luncheon is November the 2nd here at the Petroleum Club. We have a special guest from the East. Bishop Andrew Cousins is the Bishop of the Diocese of Crookston. He's also the man leading the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops Eucharistic Revival process and the big giant Eucharistic revival event that'll happen in Indianapolis next year. He'll be speaking about that effort. If you know someone who would like to join the Assembly of Catholic Professionals, or you think would be a great member of the Assembly of Catholic Professionals, please invite them. Invite them as a guest, and maybe they'll join for the coming year. One person at each table. You're more than welcome to take the flowers and the centerpieces today, and don't forget to have your parking ticket validated. Thank you all for coming, and have a great afternoon.